My dear child, what your soulmate's mother discovered today was never supposed to be revealed. For years, everyone believed one story. But the truth was hidden by someone standing much closer than anyone ever imagined. The moment she finally learned why you and your soulmate were forced apart, her entire world collapsed, because every decision she had made was based on a lie. Before this message ends, you will understand why tears cannot erase certain mistakes, and why destiny sometimes waits until the very last moment to expose the truth. Listen carefully. There was a time when your soulmate's mother genuinely believed she was protecting her child from making the biggest mistake of their life. Every warning she received seemed believable. Every conversation pointed toward the same conclusion. Every person she trusted repeated the same story about you until that story slowly became her reality. She never stopped to question where those words came from, because the people speaking them were the very people she had trusted for years. They painted a picture of you that never truly existed, and little by little, her heart accepted a version of you that was completely false. She convinced herself that separating you from her child was an act of love rather than an act of fear. At the time, she had no idea that someone was carefully manipulating every conversation behind her back, removing every opportunity for the truth to reach her ears. While she believed she was making wise decisions for her family's future, another person quietly celebrated because their plan was working exactly as intended. Every misunderstanding between you and your soulmate became another brick in the invisible wall built around both of your hearts. Every missed message, every cancelled meeting, every sudden silence, and every painful misunderstanding had been carefully influenced by someone who feared what would happen if the two of you were ever allowed to stand together without interference. Don't skip. Your soulmate never fully understood why their mother had suddenly become so distant whenever your name appeared. Questions remained unanswered. Conversations ended before they could begin. Important explanations disappeared before reaching the people who needed to hear them. Even though your soulmate tried many times to defend you, every attempt was met with another shocking accusation that seemed impossible to disprove because the evidence had already been twisted. Someone had learned that the easiest way to destroy two hearts was not through anger but through carefully planted doubt. That doubt slowly spread through the family until everyone believed they already knew the truth without ever asking you for your side of the story. Years passed under the weight of those lies, yet destiny never forgot what had actually happened. Hidden conversations remained hidden. Forgotten messages stayed buried. Silent witnesses carried guilt they were too afraid to confess. But the day finally arrived when a single forgotten piece of evidence unexpectedly resurfaced. It was something so ordinary that nobody had paid attention to it before, yet it contained the answer that everyone had been searching for without realizing it. The moment your soulmate's mother looked at it, her hands began to tremble. She reread every word again and again, hoping she had misunderstood, but the truth became clearer with every passing second. The story she had believed for years was collapsing right before her eyes, and for the first time she realized that you had never been the reason her child suffered. The real reason had been standing inside the family's circle all along, hiding behind kindness, pretending to protect everyone while secretly keeping two destined souls apart. The weight of that realization became too much for her heart to carry, and tears began falling before she could even speak a single word. The tears that fell from your soulmate's mother's eyes were not ordinary tears of sadness. They were the painful realization that every memory she had trusted had been built upon carefully arranged deception. She sat in complete silence, staring at the forgotten evidence as though it were rewriting the last several years of her life. Every harsh word she had spoken about you echoed back inside her mind. Every time she had encouraged your soulmate to move on. Every time she had refused to listen. Every moment she believed she was protecting her family suddenly became a source of unbearable regret. She whispered to herself, "What have I done?" But no answer could erase the damage that had already been done. At that exact moment, another shocking detail caught her attention. Hidden beneath the first piece of evidence was something even more heartbreaking, a conversation that had never reached her. It proved that you had actually tried to explain everything long ago, but someone had intercepted your words before they could ever reach the family. Your apology had been hidden. Your honesty had been buried. Your intentions had been twisted until they looked like betrayal. The realization struck her like lightning because she understood that you had been fighting for the truth while everyone else believed you had disappeared without caring. Don't skip. As she continued reading, the entire timeline finally began to make sense. Every strange coincidence. Every sudden misunderstanding. Every unexpected argument. Every broken promise had not happened by chance. Someone had quietly guided events in a direction that guaranteed separation. Whenever your soulmate wanted to contact you, another distraction mysteriously appeared. Whenever your name came up in family conversations, someone immediately changed the narrative with another convincing lie. Whenever hope tried to return, another carefully planned obstacle appeared before either of you could take a single step closer. Your soulmate's mother finally realized that she had unknowingly become part of another person's plan. She had believed she was making independent choices, but in reality, someone had been feeding her carefully selected pieces of information while hiding everything that could have revealed your true character. Her heart broke even more when she remembered the pain she had seen in her own child's eyes during those years. She had mistaken that pain for stubbornness, when in reality it had been the silent suffering of someone who knew deep inside that the truth had never been spoken. Now, for the first time, she understood why destiny had refused to let this story end. The truth had survived every lie, every silence, and every attempt to bury it. And somewhere at that very moment, without knowing what had just happened, you and your soulmate were both standing closer than ever to the day when everything hidden would finally come into the light. The more your soulmate's mother uncovered, the more impossible it became to deny what had really happened. Every unanswered question from the past suddenly had an answer, and every painful memory now pointed toward the same person. She could no longer convince herself that it had all been a misunderstanding. This had been planned with patience, carried out in silence, and protected by fear for far too long. She slowly gathered every message, every forgotten note, every small detail that once seemed meaningless, placing them side by side until the entire picture became impossible to ignore. Her breathing grew heavier as she realized that the lies had not only separated two people who loved each other, but they had also changed the course of an entire family. If the truth had been told from the beginning, countless tears would never have fallen, countless sleepless nights would never have existed, and her own child would never have carried such quiet pain for so many years. She covered her face with trembling hands, unable to accept that she had unknowingly helped the very person who wanted your relationship destroyed. At that moment, she stopped asking herself who was responsible, because the evidence had already answered that question. Instead, she began asking something far more painful. Is it too late to make this right? That single question echoed through the room, carrying more regret than words could ever express. Don't skip. For the first time in years, your soulmate's mother made a decision that came directly from her heart instead of fear. She knew that silence could no longer protect anyone. The truth deserved to be spoken aloud, no matter how uncomfortable it became. She quietly reached for her phone, staring at it for several long moments before taking a deep breath. She knew one conversation could change everything, but she also knew that once the truth was spoken, there would be no turning back. Across the room, your soulmate noticed something had changed in their mother's eyes. The anger was gone. The doubt had disappeared. In its place was a sorrow so deep that it could only belong to someone who had finally discovered they had judged an innocent person. Before saying a single word, she looked toward an old family photograph and whispered a quiet apology, not only to you but also to the future that had been stolen from both of you. She promised herself that no more lies would be allowed to stand between two hearts that destiny had refused to separate forever. And although neither you nor your soulmate knew it yet, the first step toward the truth had finally been taken. The person who had spent years keeping you apart had no idea that their carefully built story was beginning to collapse, because once one honest heart finds the courage to speak, even the strongest deception cannot survive for much longer. The following morning felt unlike any other. The atmosphere inside the house had completely changed, yet no one could explain why. Your soulmate's mother had barely slept because every hour of the night had been spent replaying the past in her mind. She remembered every moment she had turned away from your name, every opportunity she had ignored, every conversation she had ended before hearing the full truth. Now, each memory carried a different meaning. What she once believed was wisdom now felt like a terrible mistake. She quietly opened an old drawer where years of forgotten family papers had been stored. Hidden among them were photographs, handwritten notes, and small reminders of a time before the lies had taken control. As she looked through them, she noticed something that had escaped everyone's attention for years. The dates did not match the story she had been told. The timeline itself exposed the deception. Someone had claimed you disappeared before reaching out, yet these forgotten records proved you had continued trying to reconnect long after the family had already been convinced that you had given up. In that moment, the final piece of doubt disappeared from her heart. She no longer needed another explanation because the truth was now standing in front of her with undeniable clarity. Tears rolled down her face once again, not because she was confused anymore, but because she finally understood how much courage it must have taken for you to keep hoping while every door was being quietly closed in front of you. Don't skip. Without wasting another moment, your soulmate's mother decided that the family deserved to hear the truth together. She invited everyone into the room, including the very person whose words had influenced every decision over the years. No one suspected what was about to happen. The room was silent as she carefully placed the evidence on the table one piece at a time. At first, there were confident smiles from the one who believed their secret would never be uncovered. But those expressions slowly disappeared as each document, each message, and each forgotten detail exposed another layer of deception. Excuses quickly replaced confidence. Nervous silence replaced certainty. For the first time, the person who had worked so hard to keep you and your soulmate apart could no longer control the story. Every attempt to explain only created more questions. Every answer revealed another contradiction. Your soulmate stood frozen, realizing that the pain they had carried for years had never been caused by your lack of love. It had been created by someone else's selfish fear of losing control. Their mother turned toward them with tears still in her eyes and said the words she had wished she had spoken years earlier. I should have trusted your heart before I trusted anyone else's voice. Those words changed everything inside the room. The walls of misunderstanding that had taken years to build began collapsing within minutes. And although the wounds of the past could not disappear overnight, hope quietly returned for the first time in a very long while. Somewhere beyond that house, destiny was already preparing the next chapter, because once the truth is finally spoken aloud, it has a way of bringing separated hearts closer together than anyone ever believed possible. After the truth had finally been spoken, an overwhelming silence settled over the room. No one rushed to defend themselves anymore because the evidence had already answered every question that words could not. Your soulmate's mother slowly stood up, holding the old messages close to her heart as though they were the weight of every lost year. She looked toward your soulmate with tears that refused to stop and quietly admitted that the greatest mistake of her life had not been trusting the wrong person, it had been failing to give you the chance to speak for yourself. That realization broke something inside her, because she understood that one honest conversation years ago could have prevented so much pain. Your soulmate lowered their head, remembering every moment they had secretly believed you were still telling the truth, even when everyone else insisted otherwise. Their heart had never completely let go of you, and now they finally understood why. Love had survived because the lies were never strong enough to erase what destiny had written long before anyone tried to interfere. Don't skip. As the family remained together, another unexpected confession changed the atmosphere once again. A quiet relative, someone who had remained silent out of fear for years, finally found the courage to speak. With a trembling voice, they admitted they had witnessed several of the lies being created but had been too afraid to expose the person responsible. They described how messages had been hidden, conversations interrupted, and innocent words deliberately twisted until they sounded completely different. Every sentence confirmed what your soulmate's mother had already begun to realize, that the separation had never happened naturally. It had been carefully engineered by someone who feared what your future together would mean. Hearing this final confession shattered the last remaining doubt in everyone's mind. Your soulmate closed their eyes, taking a slow breath as years of unanswered questions suddenly found their answers. Their mother stepped forward and made a promise she never imagined she would have to make. She promised that she would personally help repair what had been broken, no matter how difficult the journey became, because truth deserved more than tears, it deserved action. At that very moment, without either of you knowing it, the path that had once seemed permanently closed quietly began to open again. The lies had finally reached their end, and for the first time in years, hope was no longer just a dream. It had become a real possibility waiting just ahead. Days passed, but the truth refused to fade. Instead, it became stronger with every conversation, every confession, and every memory that finally found its rightful place. Your soulmate's mother could no longer live as though nothing had happened. Every morning she woke with the same thought: how many years were stolen because I believed a lie? That question followed her everywhere. She visited old places where she remembered hearing your name for the first time, replaying every decision she had made. What once seemed like ordinary memories now revealed hidden warnings she had failed to notice. She remembered the hesitation in your soulmate's voice whenever the family spoke against you. She remembered moments when someone interrupted the conversation just as the truth was about to be spoken. She remembered strange coincidences that had never truly made sense. Now, those scattered moments fit together like pieces of a forgotten puzzle. The guilt became almost unbearable, but instead of allowing regret to consume her, she decided that the remaining years would not be controlled by the same fear that had destroyed the past. She knew there was only one path left. The truth had to reach you exactly as it had finally reached her. Don't skip. That evening, she asked your soulmate to sit beside her. For several minutes neither of them spoke. Finally, she looked into their eyes and said, "If destiny has waited this long to reveal everything, then perhaps it has not finished writing your story." Those words filled the room with a quiet hope that had not existed for years. Together they began gathering everything that proved your innocence: the forgotten messages, the hidden notes, the dates that exposed every lie, and the testimony of those who had finally found the courage to speak. They were no longer collecting evidence to convince themselves. They were preparing to give you the justice you had been denied for so long. Meanwhile, the person who had caused the separation began to notice that the family's attitude had completely changed. Their influence was disappearing. Their excuses no longer carried any weight. The control they had enjoyed for years was slipping away, and for the first time they realized the truth was moving faster than they could stop it. They understood that once you learned what had happened behind the scenes, every lie would collapse forever. And somewhere, perhaps without even realizing why, you felt an unexpected sense of peace settle over your heart, as though destiny itself was quietly whispering that the season of separation was finally coming to an end, and that the reunion everyone once believed was impossible was now closer than it had ever been before. For the first time in years, your soulmate's mother no longer allowed fear to decide what happened next. She understood that truth delayed is still truth, but every day it remains hidden, more hearts continue to suffer. Early the next morning, she carefully placed every message, every handwritten note, every forgotten record, and every piece of evidence into a single folder. She looked at it for several moments before closing it with trembling hands. This was no longer just a collection of papers, it was proof that your name had been judged unfairly. As she walked toward the door, your soulmate quietly stopped her and asked, "Do you really believe everything can still change after all this time?" She smiled through tears and answered softly, "Some wounds take years to heal, but the moment truth begins walking beside love, impossible things become possible again." Those words settled deep inside your soulmate's heart. For the first time since the separation began, they no longer felt trapped by the past. Instead, they felt as though destiny had quietly begun opening a door that no lie could ever close again. Don't skip. Far away, completely unaware of everything unfolding inside that home, you continued living your life, carrying unanswered questions that had followed you for years. You never truly understood why everything had fallen apart so suddenly. You blamed yourself for conversations that never happened, for promises you never broke, and for mistakes you never made. Yet on that very day, destiny had already started moving toward you without your knowledge. Your soulmate's mother had made one final promise to herself, that she would not rest until she looked into your eyes and personally apologized for believing a story that was never true. She knew forgiveness could never be demanded, it could only be earned. At the same time, the person who had spent years manipulating the family began noticing that every secret they had buried was resurfacing one after another. Their confidence disappeared as more relatives remembered forgotten details that supported the truth instead of the lies. The carefully built illusion that had survived for years was collapsing faster than anyone expected. And as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, one undeniable reality became clear to everyone involved. The separation that had once seemed permanent was never written by destiny, it had been written by deception. Now that deception had finally been exposed, destiny was preparing something no one could stop anymore. The next meeting between you, your soulmate, and the mother who had finally learned the truth would not simply be an emotional reunion. It would become the moment that changed every life connected to this story forever. When the long-awaited day finally arrived, your soulmate's mother stood only a few steps away from you, yet it felt as though she was standing before every mistake she had made over the years. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence carried more emotion than words ever could. Then, with tears filling her eyes, she slowly walked toward you and said, "I spent years believing a story that was never true. I judged your heart without ever allowing you to defend it. I cannot return the time that was stolen from you, but I will never stop asking for your forgiveness." Those words left everyone speechless. Your soulmate watched with trembling hands, realizing they were witnessing a moment they had secretly prayed for through countless sleepless nights. The walls built by fear, misunderstanding, and deception had finally fallen. No dramatic argument followed. No shouting was necessary. The truth had already spoken louder than anyone in the room. In that quiet moment, every tear represented healing instead of heartbreak. Every painful memory became proof that genuine love had survived even when everything around it had tried to destroy it. Don't skip. As the family gathered together, something remarkable happened. The person whose lies had kept two destined hearts apart could no longer hide behind excuses. Their silence became their confession, and the family finally saw them for who they truly were. No one celebrated their downfall because the greatest victory that day was not revenge, it was truth. Your soulmate's mother gently took your hand and placed it into your soulmate's hand, saying, "No one in this family will ever stand between you again. From this day forward, our home will be built on honesty, not fear." Those simple words carried the weight of years of regret and the promise of a new beginning. Although the past could never be erased, it no longer had the power to control the future. The journey that had begun with hidden lies, broken trust, and endless separation ended with courage, forgiveness, and hope. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of this story. When love is genuine, deception may delay it, fear may wound it, and time may test it, but truth has a way of finding the light. So if this message found you today, let it remind you never to lose hope too quickly. Some answers arrive late because they are preparing a future stronger than the pain of the past. The right hearts always find their way back when truth finally has the courage to speak, and when that moment comes, even the longest separation cannot stop what destiny has lovingly prepared from the very beginning. Thank you for staying until the end of this journey. May your heart always choose truth over fear, hope over doubt, and love over every lie that tries to stand in its way.